There comes a moment in life when you look around and realize you're surrounded by people, yet you feel more alone than ever. It's not emptiness, it's not sadness, it's a shift, a quiet awakening taking place inside you, and when this shift begins, it doesn't announce itself with fireworks or dramatic changes. It arrives silently, softly, almost unnoticeably at first. You simply wake up one day and feel the distance, a quiet space between you and the world you used to fit into so easily. You start observing instead of engaging. You hear conversations but don't feel pulled into them. You look at the people around you with a strange sense of unfamiliarity, as if the connection you once shared has dissolved into thin air. Most people mistake this for loneliness. They think they're losing their spark, losing their social side, losing their sense of belonging. But in truth, you aren't losing anything. You're evolving. Every deep transformation begins with a sense of separation, not because you're meant to live alone, but because growth happens quietly, away from the noise. Your soul pulls you inward so you can see yourself clearly, without distractions, without old expectations, without the pressure to perform for the world. This inward pull feels like disconnection, but it's actually a cleansing, a clearing of emotional space, a necessary pause before the next chapter of your life begins. You start noticing that old patterns no longer excite you. Conversations that once felt fun now feel empty. You find your energy retreating from people who live in chaos or drama. You don't have the desire to force laughter, pretend to be interested, or participate in cycles that drain you. You're not becoming cold, you're becoming aware. Your inner world is shifting, asking for honesty, depth, and meaning. And the reason you feel disconnected is because much of what once surrounded you was built on habits, not true alignment. This transformation begins subtly. You find yourself needing more silence, more breathing room, more time with your own thoughts, not because you're lost, but because you're finally listening to the parts of yourself you once ignored. You begin to recognize the difference between being alone and being at peace. You begin to understand that solitude is not a punishment, it's a sanctuary. Feeling disconnected can also mean your spirit is outgrowing people who remain the same. You are healing in ways others may not understand. You're learning lessons they are not ready to face. You're seeing truths they might still be running from. And that gap, that shift in consciousness, creates distance. It doesn't mean they're bad people. It doesn't mean you're abandoning them. It simply means your paths are moving in different directions. When your inner world becomes more awake, more aware, more aligned, you naturally drift away from environments built on patterns you no longer resonate with. Your soul knows when it's time to rise. It knows when certain energies no longer match your frequency. It knows when staying connected would mean dimming your own light just to fit into places you've outgrown. And this is where the awakening becomes clear. You start feeling the difference between forced connection and authentic connection. You begin realizing that you shouldn't have to beg for understanding, attention, or reciprocity. You shouldn't have to shrink your voice to be heard or silence your feelings to be accepted. You want depth, and your transformation is guiding you toward people who offer that depth effortlessly, people who don't drain you just to stay close, people who don't require you to hide the most honest parts of yourself. Another reason for this disconnection is that your mind and heart are becoming clearer. You're beginning to see the truth about your boundaries, your emotional capacity, your desires, your purpose. You're learning who you are beyond the expectations of others. This clarity can make past relationships feel unfamiliar because you're no longer approaching them from the same place of insecurity or need. You've grown. Your self-awareness has expanded, and what once felt like connection now feels like compromise. Transformation is rarely comfortable. It often arrives disguised as isolation. It feels like you're floating away from the people you once depended on. It feels like your heart is stretching into places your mind hasn't fully understood yet. But this discomfort is meaningful. It's signaling that you're transitioning into a new level of your life. You might feel misunderstood. You might feel like you can't explain what you're going through because even you don't fully understand it yet. You might even feel guilty for pulling back. But transformation requires that you release the old before the new can enter. And the space you're creating now is making room for people, experiences, and opportunities that will match the person you're becoming, not the person you used to be. During this phase, your intuition becomes louder, your sensitivity becomes sharper, your awareness becomes deeper, and the world around you might feel distant simply because your inner world is demanding your attention. It's guiding you to reconnect with your values, your passions, your truth. It's urging you to rebuild your sense of connection from the inside out, rather than seeking it from the outside in. Feeling disconnected is a spiritual recalibration. It's your soul aligning your life with your purpose. It's your inner compass turning toward authenticity. It's a shedding of old skins, the versions of you that lived for others, that relied on society's definition of connection, that tolerated too much just to feel included. This phase may feel lonely, but it is sacred. Because after this transformation, you will not return to the same friendships, the same environments, or the same patterns. You will return stronger, clearer, more grounded. You will attract people who see you, not just the role you played. You will form connections that feel nourishing instead of exhausting. And you will find that the disconnection you feared was actually the doorway to the truest connection of all, the one you're building with your own soul. This shift is not the end of connection. It's the beginning of alignment. It's not loneliness, it's preparation. It's not emptiness, it's evolution. And when the transformation settles, you will understand why you had to step back, so you could rise forward. You're shedding old layers, patterns, and people who no longer align with your growth. And though this sounds poetic, the process rarely feels gentle. It feels like standing in the middle of your own life and realizing that the things that once felt familiar, comforting, or necessary no longer fit the person you're becoming. It feels like waking up inside a life you built with an older version of yourself and noticing that something in your spirit is quietly asking for more truth, more peace, more alignment, more authenticity. Shedding old layers is not a single moment or a clean break. It is a long, unfolding journey. It happens slowly at first, then all at once. You start noticing what drains you, what unsettles you, what no longer matches your intentions. You become aware of patterns you repeated out of habit, patterns that once protected you, helped you survive, or gave you temporary comfort. But now those same patterns feel restrictive, heavy, outdated. They were meant for who you used to be, not who you're becoming. This shedding begins inside you. Maybe you've been feeling exhausted by conversations that repeat the same small circle of complaints and gossip. Maybe you've lost interest in seeking validation from people who never truly saw your worth. Maybe you've grown tired of being the strong one, the quiet one, the forgiving one, the one who carries the emotional weight of every room. Maybe you've simply reached a point where peace has become more important than approval. The layers you're shedding are not superficial. They are emotional, mental, spiritual layers. Beliefs you outgrew, fears you confronted, roles you no longer want to play. These layers were built over years of experiences, mistakes, wounds, expectations, and survival strategies. They helped you once, but they cannot help you rise. Growth demands a different version of you. It asks for expansion, It asks for honesty, it asks for courage, and in the process, it asks you to let go. You're shedding the need to be understood by everyone. You're shedding the desire to make yourself small to keep others comfortable. You're shedding the pressure to meet expectations that were never yours to carry. You're shedding the fear of disappointing people who already benefited from your silence. This process can feel like loss, but it is liberation. At first, it may feel like you're breaking apart. You might look around and wonder why certain friendships feel distant, why certain conversations feel forced, why certain behaviors no longer feel natural. It's because your spirit is separating from what once kept you limited. When you begin to grow, the world you built around your old self starts to crumble, not as punishment, but as clearing. Life is making space for what aligns with your evolution. People who once felt close may start to feel unfamiliar, not because they changed, but because you did. You see things differently now. You hear differently, feel differently, think differently. Your energy shifts, and that shift reveals what was always incompatible with your truth. It's painful to outgrow people you still love. It's heavy to recognize that some relationships were rooted in old wounds, old versions of you, or old patterns of giving too much. But growth does not wait for everyone to rise with you. Sometimes you elevate quietly, internally, and the distance happens naturally, without conflict, without anger, without blame. Just a soft turning away towards something deeper, something truer. You're shedding patterns that taught you to put yourself last, patterns that taught you to stay silent, to keep the peace, patterns that convinced you that your worth depended on how useful, agreeable, or accommodating you could be. Now, your spirit is tired of shrinking. It wants room, room to feel, room to breathe, room to claim the space you once denied yourself. You're shedding the emotional layers of guilt, guilt for choosing yourself, guilt for saying no, guilt for wanting a life that reflects your inner truth. That guilt is not your truth. It is the echo of an older version of you who believed they didn't deserve to set boundaries or honor their needs. But you do, and shedding guilt is essential to stepping into your wholeness. You're also shedding the mental layers of fear, fear of being alone, fear of letting go, fear of stepping into the unknown. But every transformation requires you to walk through the unknown. It is the doorway to becoming. And even though the path may look empty during the transition, you are not abandoned. You are being prepared. The people you are shedding were chapters, not your story. Some were lessons. Some were mirrors. Some were temporary companions during times when you didn't fully know yourself. Losing them doesn't mean something went wrong. It means your story is moving forward. When you grow internally, you can no longer stay where your soul feels dismissed. You can no longer participate in conversations that go nowhere. You can no longer entertain connections that don't reciprocate effort, love, or honesty. You can no longer invest energy into people who only show up when they need something. Your spirit simply refuses to stay small, and this shedding doesn't require resentment. You don't need to hate anyone to move forward. Sometimes the most powerful release is the gentle kind, the quiet acceptance that a chapter has ended, and that's okay. As you shed old layers, you begin to see yourself more clearly. You rediscover your voice, the one you muted to keep peace. You rediscover your desires, the ones you buried to fit into expectations. You rediscover your boundaries, the ones you allowed others to cross because you didn't want to lose them. But now, you are becoming someone who would rather lose people than lose yourself again. That is growth. That is power. That is awakening. And shedding old layers makes space for new alignment with people who reflect light instead of taking it, People who resonate with your values, your growth, your truth. People who speak your soul's language without needing translation. People who recognize your worth without requiring you to earn it. But before those people arrive, there is a transitional space, a quiet, lonely feeling space where everything old is falling away and everything new has not yet appeared. This is where most people panic and try to run back to the familiar. But you are learning to stay, to trust, to hold space for the in-between, because you're shedding not just people, but versions of yourself you've outgrown. The people pleaser, the overgiver, the silent sufferer, the self-doubter, the one who accepted crumbs because they didn't believe they deserved more. And as you release those layers, you create space for the person you're becoming, the one who chooses peace over approval, truth over convenience, alignment over attachment. This shedding is not destruction. It is rebirth. You are not losing your life. You are rebuilding it. You are not breaking down. You are breaking open. You are not becoming empty. You are becoming clear. You are shedding what you were never meant to carry into the next chapter of your evolution. And though the process may feel heavy, it is leading you toward a life that finally feels like home, not because of who is in it, but because of who you are becoming within it. Your spirit is outgrowing environments where you once had to shrink yourself. And when this happens, it doesn't arrive with a loud announcement. It doesn't come with a warning. It begins quietly, like a soft whisper in your chest telling you that the places where you once found comfort now feel too small. You begin to notice the subtle pull towards something bigger, something deeper, something truer, even if you can't yet name it. Growing spiritually isn't about becoming better than anyone else. It's about becoming better for yourself. And part of that process means recognizing when the spaces you exist in no longer support the fullness of who you are becoming. For a long time, you might have adapted. You might have bent yourself into shapes that didn't match your true identity. You might have lowered your voice, softened your opinions, dimmed your light, or carried more than what was yours to carry, all just to keep the peace, to avoid conflict, to earn approval, or to feel like you belonged. But there comes a moment when your spirit refuses to shrink any longer. The version of you that once tolerated those environments cannot survive in them anymore, because your inner growth demands space to breathe. You begin to notice this when conversations that once felt normal now feel draining. You sit among people and feel an invisible distance, not because you're detached, but because you're growing in a direction they may not understand. Your thoughts become deeper, your priorities shift, your heart becomes more sensitive to energies and intentions. And as this happens, environments that operate on superficiality, chaos, or emotional immaturity start to feel suffocating. Your spirit knows when a room is not good for your soul. You feel it physically, a heaviness in the chest, a tightness in your voice, a silent pressure to act smaller than you truly are. You feel it emotionally, the sense that you must hide your dreams, your healing, your wisdom, or your boundaries so others don't become uncomfortable. You feel it mentally, the exhaustion of pretending to be okay in spaces that no longer nourish you. This is the moment your spirit begins to rise, and rising always requires leaving something behind. It means letting go of the version of you who accepted the bare minimum. It means releasing relationships where love came with conditions or expectations that cost you your peace. It means stepping away from friendships where you were celebrated only when you played a certain role: the helper, the listener, the rescuer, the quiet one, the agreeable one. Your spirit is outgrowing environments built on old patterns, old wounds, and old identities. And you can feel it in the way your body reacts when you're in those spaces. You no longer want to carry the emotional burdens of everyone around you. You no longer want to be the one who smooths over every conflict. You no longer want to sacrifice your needs to keep relationships alive that would die without your effort. This growth isn't selfish, it's necessary. It is the moment you start valuing emotional alignment over social obligation. It is the moment you realize that staying somewhere that shrinks you is far more painful than leaving and stepping into the unknown. You may feel guilty. You may feel like you're abandoning people you cared about. You may feel confused because many of these environments once felt like home. But home is not just a place, it's a feeling. And when your spirit begins evolving, what once felt like home may now feel like a cage. Sometimes you will outgrow people you still love. Sometimes you will outgrow environments that once helped you survive. Sometimes you will outgrow versions of yourself that you thought were permanent. This is the heart of transformation. Not everyone can walk with you into your next chapter because not everyone is meant to grow at the pace your spirit is growing. And that's okay. Your journey is not meant to be crowded. It's meant to be aligned. As you outgrow these environments, you begin to crave something different. You want conversations that stretch your mind, not ones that drain your energy. You want connections that feel safe, not ones where you must constantly guard your heart. You want environments where you don't have to pretend, spaces where your dreams are celebrated, your boundaries are respected, and your presence is valued without needing to perform. You begin to realize that you no longer want to fit into places that ask you to play small. Your spirit wants expansiveness, deeper truths, quieter moments, genuine connections, spaces that allow you to breathe and grow freely. And when your soul desires expansion, anything that requires shrinking begins to fall away. This falling away can feel lonely. You may feel like you're drifting, like you don't belong anywhere, but this in-between space is sacred. It is the space where your spirit unlearns what was forced on you. It is where you rebuild your identity from truth, not survival. It is where you learn to stand tall in rooms that once made you feel invisible. You start reclaiming pieces of yourself you lost along the way. Your voice, your intuition, your joy, your boundaries, your dreams. You start understanding that you never had to earn the right to be yourself. You start realizing that shrinking was never your destiny. It was a temporary strategy to survive environments that couldn't handle your fullness. And once you reach this awareness, something powerful happens. You stop seeking validation from places that cannot see your worth. You stop trying to convince people to treat you better. You stop settling for love that feels inconsistent. You stop investing in connections that require you to betray yourself. Your spirit becomes louder, stronger, more insistent. It guides you toward people who feel like ease instead of effort, toward environments where growth is natural, not forbidden, toward relationships where you're not just tolerated, you're understood, toward a life that mirrors your inner evolution instead of opposing it. This journey is not about arrogance, it is about alignment. It's about honoring the truth that your spirit has outgrown certain places and you cannot stay where you're not meant to bloom. You are rising into a new level of yourself, a version that no longer apologizes for taking up space, a version that honors intuition over obligation, a version that knows peace is more important than approval, a version that understands you cannot grow where your spirit is not free. Your spirit is outgrowing environments where you once had to shrink yourself. And that is one of the clearest signs that you are healing, evolving, awakening. Trust it, honor it, follow it. Because the environments that can hold the weight, depth, and truth of who you are becoming are waiting for you to arrive. You are learning to value depth over noise and authenticity over social obligation. This shift doesn't happen all at once. It unfolds quietly, often after you've spent years giving your energy to conversations that left you empty, relationships that felt one-sided, and environments where your presence was appreciated only when it was convenient for others. At some point, something in you wakes up. Something in you begins to crave truth, not the polished, acceptable kind, but the real kind, the kind that requires vulnerability, introspection, and courage. Depth becomes more meaningful to you because noise has exhausted you. You realize that not every conversation is worth your attention, not every connection deserves your emotional investment, and not every social interaction leads to genuine belonging. You start to see that so many of the exchanges you once participated in were simply habits, not true connections. You talked because it was expected. You showed up because it was polite. You smiled because you didn't want to disappoint. But underneath, your soul was starving for something richer, something more aligned with who you really are. And slowly, you begin to step away from the noise. Not because you've become distant, but because shallow interactions no longer nourish you. You no longer want to talk about people. You want to talk about ideas, dreams, growth, healing, faith, purpose, the inner battles we fight, the truths we're afraid to speak. You want depth, conversations that stretch your spirit instead of draining your energy, conversations where silence doesn't feel awkward, where honesty isn't punished, where vulnerability isn't misunderstood. Depth is not about heaviness. It's about truth. It's about being fully present. It's about speaking from the soul instead of the surface. It's about understanding rather than reacting, listening rather than waiting for your turn, connecting rather than performing. When you begin valuing depth, you also start recognizing how much of your old life was built on noise. Social expectations, roles you played, relationships that survived only because you kept feeding them with effort you never received in return. The noise kept you busy but not fulfilled, connected but not understood, surrounded but still lonely. And that's when authenticity begins to matter more than social obligation. Authenticity means you're no longer willing to betray yourself to make others comfortable. It means you stop pretending to be okay when you're not. It means you speak your truth softly but firmly. It means you honor your boundaries even if others don't understand. It means you let go of the pressure to be liked, perfect, agreeable, or easy to digest. For so long, society expects you to fit in, to be polite, to avoid conflict, to keep relationships alive even when they are draining. But authenticity teaches you that belonging is not found in pretending. It's found in being seen. And you can only be seen when you show up as your real self. This transition can be uncomfortable. People may accuse you of changing, becoming distant, becoming too serious, too quiet, too selective, but they don't understand that you're not withdrawing, you're refining, you're filtering out what no longer resonates with your spirit. You're choosing quality over quantity. You're choosing honesty over habit. You're choosing peace over approval. There was a time you would have stayed in conversations that bored your soul just to avoid being rude. There was a time you would have forced friendships because loneliness felt scarier than misalignment. There was a time you said yes because saying no made you feel guilty. But now, you're learning that your time, your energy, your emotional space are sacred. You're learning that you cannot thrive in environments that demand your silence. You're learning that authenticity isn't a choice, it's survival. As you value depth, you realize that some people can only meet you on the surface. And that's okay. Not everyone is meant to walk with you into the deeper parts of your journey. Some people are meant for the earlier chapters of your life, the ones where you were still discovering yourself. But now, as you evolve, so do your needs, your standards, your spirit. Depth attracts depth. Authenticity attracts authenticity. When you speak from your soul, you draw in people who recognize your language. When you live honestly, you attract those who feel safe doing the same. When you let go of social obligation, you make room for genuine connection. This shift also teaches you the beauty of solitude. Not loneliness, solitude. The quiet space where you sit with your thoughts without distraction, where you reflect, where you learn, where you heal, where you rebuild. You start to realize that your own company can be more comforting than a room full of people who don't truly see you. You begin to understand that silence is not empty. It is full of truth. You become less interested in the performance of connection and more interested in the reality of it. You no longer want friendships that exist only online, only in small talk, only in shared history. You want relationships built on trust, openness, growth, mutual respect, emotional intelligence. You want spaces where you can be messy without being judged, where you can be quiet without being questioned, where you can be yourself without holding back. You stop caring about being invited everywhere. You stop fearing what others think when you choose to stay home. You stop forcing yourself to engage in circles that drain your spirit. You stop pretending to be the version of yourself they once knew, the version that tolerated anything to belong. Because now you know belonging is not about changing yourself. Belonging is where your real self is welcomed without condition. Authenticity becomes your compass. Depth becomes your direction. And as you choose them both, your life begins to shift in ways you didn't expect. You may lose people, but you gain yourself. You may lose crowds, but you gain genuine connection. You may lose old identities, but you gain inner peace. You may lose noise, but you gain clarity. This journey is not about becoming cold or detached. It's about becoming intentional. It's about choosing what aligns with your soul. It's about recognizing that you deserve relationships where you don't have to hide the most honest parts of yourself. It's about stepping into a life where your energy is respected, your boundaries are honored, and your spirit is free to expand. You are learning to value depth over noise and authenticity over social obligation because you are finally rising into the truest version of yourself. And once you taste the freedom of living honestly, the noise becomes unbearable and the truth becomes irresistible. You no longer want the surface. You want the soul. You no longer want the crowd. You want connection. You no longer want the performance. You want peace. And you will choose it again and again because your spirit knows exactly where it belongs. There comes a moment in your life when the noise around you begins to fade, not because the world has become quieter, but because you have become more aware of yourself. This experience, this strange feeling of disconnecting from people, places, and patterns that once felt familiar, can be confusing at first. It can feel like you are drifting away from everything you used to understand. But in truth, this disconnection is not emptiness. It is space being cleared. It is the soil of your life being turned over so something new can grow. And though it may feel uncomfortable, this space is where clarity, self-awareness, and spiritual awakening begin. You may wake up one day and realize that the conversations you once tolerated feel hollow now. The routines you once followed without question begin to feel heavy. The people you used to laugh with feel further away, even if they're standing right beside you. This is not you falling apart. This is you rising slowly but surely into a version of yourself that no longer fits inside the old containers. When life starts removing people or energy from your path, you are not being abandoned. You are being aligned. You are being prepared to meet yourself, the deepest version, the one who has been waiting beneath the layers of expectation and history. This space of disconnection teaches you to listen, not to the opinions of others, not to the pressure of social obligations, but to the quiet truth inside your own spirit. When you no longer have the distractions that kept you moving in circles, you begin to hear the whispers you once ignored, the whisper that says you deserve peace, that you deserve depth, that you deserve a life that reflects who you are becoming, not who you used to be. Clarity doesn't arrive with noise, it arrives with stillness, and in that stillness, you begin to see your life from a higher vantage point. You may start asking questions you never dared to ask before. Why do I feel drained around certain people? Why do I keep trying to revive connections that died long ago? Why do I silence myself to fit into spaces where my soul feels unseen? These questions aren't signs of confusion, they are signs of awakening. They mark the moment when you begin to peel back the layers of who you are not, so you can rediscover who you truly are. When you disconnect from what drains you, you reconnect with what strengthens you. When you disconnect from what distracts you, you reconnect with what guides you. Self-awareness grows in silence. It grows in pauses. It grows in the gaps life creates when it feels like everything is falling away. In that space, you notice patterns you once lived inside without thinking. You notice the ways you used to shrink so others could feel comfortable. You notice the ways you overextended yourself just to feel included. And suddenly, you see that your spirit has been carrying more weight than it was ever meant to hold. This realization is not meant to bring guilt. It is meant to bring freedom. As you grow more aware of yourself, your needs, your boundaries, your feelings, you begin to see your journey differently. You begin to understand why certain friendships faded, why certain paths closed, why certain energies felt heavy. You begin to understand that not everyone is meant to walk with you forever. Some people enter your life to teach you who you are. Others enter to teach you who you are not. And when their purpose is complete, the connection naturally dissolves. That dissolution is not a punishment, it is protection. This disconnection is the doorway to awakening. Awakening is not a dramatic moment, but a series of small, quiet realizations. It is the slow return to your true self. It is the understanding that your worth is not measured by how many people approve of you or how many spaces you can fit into. It is the recognition that your peace is sacred, your alignment is precious, and your path is uniquely yours. Awakening happens when you stop trying to hold on to everything and everyone, and you start trusting that what is meant for you will recognize you, choose you, and stay aligned with you without force. Your spirit is expanding, and expansion always requires space. Think of a seed. Before it grows, it breaks. Before it rises, it splits open. Before it becomes something beautiful, it disconnects from what held it together. You are going through something similar. The breaking is not destruction, it is transformation. The emptiness is not loneliness, it is preparation. You are being given room to rise into your own truth. And although this disconnection may make you feel misunderstood, remember that clarity often isolates you before it empowers you. People who are not growing at the same pace will not understand the language of your silence. They will not understand why you suddenly value truth over convenience or why you seek peace over popularity. But the people who are meant to be part of your next chapter will recognize this version of you without explanation. They will not fear your growth. They will grow with you. Spiritual awakening is not something you chase. It is something you grow into. It happens when you begin to see life not from the eyes of fear, but from the eyes of truth. It happens when you stop asking, why is everything leaving me? And you start understanding everything is making room for what's meant to arrive. It is the moment you begin to feel guided rather than lost, connected rather than abandoned, aligned rather than confused. Awakening is the moment you recognize that your disconnection is actually your reconnection to your soul, to your purpose, to your higher self. You are not meant to stay where you feel unseen. You are not meant to silence your spirit so others can feel louder. You are not meant to shrink your heart so others can feel comfortable. This disconnection is your spirit's way of saying, it is time. Time to grow, time to release, time to rise. And though it may feel lonely at times, remember this: the path to awakening is walked alone, but it does not end alone. You will meet people who understand your depth, who speak your language, who honor your truth. But you have to make space for them first. And this moment of disconnection is creating that space. So trust it. Trust the silence. Trust the space. Trust the shifting of your spirit. Something inside you is awakening, and this disconnection is simply the clearing that allows your soul to breathe again. You're moving toward relationships that nourish your soul rather than drain it. And this movement is not accidental. It is the natural consequence of growth, self-awareness, and the quiet insistence of your spirit. For years, you may have tolerated interactions that left you exhausted, conversations that went in circles without substance, and bonds that felt one-sided because you believed connection required sacrifice, compromise, and constant giving. You believed that in order to belong, you had to overextend yourself, bend yourself into shapes that didn't feel natural, and carry burdens that were never yours to carry. But as you evolve, you realize that real connection does not demand depletion. Real connection adds energy, light, and meaning to your life. The relationships that nourish your soul are subtle. They do not scream for attention or validation. They are quiet, yet profound. They are spaces where you can be entirely yourself without fear of judgment or rejection. In these connections, silence is not awkward, laughter is not forced, and support is not conditional. You feel seen not because you play a role, but because you show up fully. These relationships do not demand you shrink or compromise your truth. Instead, they welcome your authenticity, embrace your flaws, and celebrate your growth. This shift toward nourishing relationships begins with awareness. You start to notice the difference between interactions that give and interactions that take. You see how certain people leave you lighter, brighter, more inspired, while others leave you tired, anxious, or emotionally drained. You begin to recognize patterns of imbalance, patterns where your energy was spent repairing, rescuing, or pleasing without reciprocity. And once you see it, you can no longer ignore it. You understand that your time, your energy, and your emotional bandwidth are sacred. They are not resources to be depleted for the comfort of others. They are the foundation of your well-being, and they deserve protection. You start setting boundaries, sometimes for the first time in your life. Boundaries are not walls. They are the guardrails that ensure your energy flows in the right direction. They teach others how to treat you without bitterness or fear. By honoring your own needs, you signal to the world that your spirit is valuable. And as you enforce these boundaries, you notice a natural separation occurring. Some relationships fade, some connections dissolve, some people drift away, not out of malice, but because the dynamic that once existed was based on imbalance, and imbalance cannot survive the evolution of self-awareness. This separation is not failure, it is liberation. It is an acknowledgement that not everyone is meant to accompany you into the next chapter of your life. Some people were meant to teach lessons, show you reflections of yourself, or simply walk with you for a season. Once those purposes are fulfilled, the universe gently shifts your paths apart. And though this can feel uncomfortable, it is necessary for your soul's nourishment. By releasing relationships that drain you, you make space for those that energize you, uplift you, and align with your true essence. As you move toward nourishing relationships, you become more selective. You no longer chase approval or validation. You no longer try to please at the cost of your peace. You no longer stay in situations out of fear of loneliness or rejection. Instead, you begin to gravitate toward people whose energy resonates with yours. People who inspire, support, and elevate you. People who speak truth with kindness, listen with empathy, and love without conditions. These are the relationships that feed your spirit, spark your curiosity, and encourage your growth. Nourishing relationships require reciprocity, but not in a transactional way. They are rooted in mutual respect and shared energy. They are spaces where effort flows naturally because each party values the other's presence and contribution. In these relationships, giving does not feel like sacrifice. It feels like participation in something meaningful. You are not constantly counting what you owe or what you are owed. Instead, you exist in a rhythm of mutual support, encouragement, and understanding. As you seek these connections, you also discover the importance of self-nourishment. You begin to realize that no relationship can sustain your soul if your own spirit is neglected. You invest in yourself, your growth, and your well-being. You cultivate habits, practices, and environments that replenish your energy and reinforce your sense of worth. Meditation, reflection, creative expression, time in nature, or simply being alone in quiet contemplation become essential acts of self-care. By nourishing yourself first, you bring a full, vibrant self into every relationship rather than a fragmented, depleted version of yourself hoping to be completed by others. This movement toward soul-nourishing relationships is also a form of empowerment. You reclaim your power to choose who enters your life and how they interact with your energy. You stop tolerating disrespect, manipulation, or emotional exploitation. You refuse to shrink to accommodate someone else's comfort. You no longer give your energy to people who consistently drain it, knowing that doing so compromises your spirit. By choosing wisely, you assert that your time, energy, and emotional health are valuable and that you are worthy of being uplifted rather than diminished. You also begin to notice how nourishing relationships impact your overall life. They bring joy that is not fleeting, peace that is not conditional, and inspiration that encourages continuous growth. They provide a mirror in which you can see your strengths and vulnerabilities reflected with honesty and care. They give you a safe space to explore your emotions, confront your fears, and celebrate your successes. These relationships create a fertile ground for your spirit to flourish, unlike draining connections, which stunt growth and breed fatigue. As this awareness deepens, you understand that soul-nourishing relationships are rare and their value cannot be measured by quantity alone. It is not the number of friends, colleagues, or acquaintances that matters. It is the quality of presence, depth of understanding, and authenticity of connection. A single relationship that uplifts your soul is more meaningful than dozens that leave you exhausted. You come to cherish these bonds and invest in them thoughtfully, recognizing that nurturing such connections requires time, care, and emotional intelligence. You also begin to recognize the signs of draining relationships more clearly. They often involve constant criticism, judgment, or manipulation. They may be imbalanced, with one person giving far more than the other. They demand energy without offering support, or attention without genuine understanding. They leave you anxious, frustrated, or emotionally depleted. By identifying these patterns, you create space for healthier connections and protect your spirit from unnecessary harm. Moving toward nourishing relationships also encourages gratitude. You start to appreciate the people who show up authentically, support your growth, and honor your boundaries. You notice the subtle ways in which they add to your life. through encouragement, understanding, shared experiences, or simply being present. You learn to celebrate these connections, not take them for granted, and recognize that the energy you invest in them is reciprocated and valued. This shift transforms the way you relate to others on a profound level. You communicate more honestly, express your needs more clearly, and engage with empathy and intention. You no longer tolerate superficiality or pretension because your spirit recognizes the difference between genuine energy and empty performance. You create relationships that are mutually enriching, emotionally balanced, and spiritually fulfilling rather than relationships rooted in obligation, convenience, or habit. Ultimately, moving toward relationships that nourish your soul is an act of self-respect and spiritual alignment. It is a conscious choice to surround yourself with energy that elevates, inspires, and supports your journey rather than diminishes or distracts from it. It is a commitment to honor your boundaries, cultivate your own growth, and invest in connections that are meaningful and reciprocal. This shift is both a reflection of your inner evolution and a catalyst for further awakening, guiding you toward a life of authenticity, depth, and fulfillment. Through this intentional movement, you learn that it is not only acceptable but necessary to prioritize relationships that align with your well-being. You discover that nourishing connections amplify your joy, strengthen your resilience, and expand your capacity for love and understanding. You see that life is too precious to spend energy on interactions that drain or diminish you. By choosing wisely, you create a life filled with genuine companionship, emotional richness, and spiritual alignment, allowing you to thrive fully in every aspect of your existence. You are learning that soul-nourishing relationships do not just happen. They are cultivated, chosen, and maintained with care. They require awareness, discernment, and the courage to let go of what no longer serves you. And as you continue this journey, you begin to realize that the quality of your relationships is directly tied to the quality of your life. By surrounding yourself with energy that lifts you, inspires you, and resonates with your authentic self, you create a life where joy, clarity, and fulfillment are not occasional gifts, but natural outcomes of intentional living. You understand that every relationship you cultivate is either feeding or depleting your spirit. And armed with this clarity, you make choices that protect your energy and support your growth. You move deliberately toward people who see and honor your value, who encourage your expansion, and who reflect your truth. You leave behind relationships that compromise your integrity, sap your vitality, or cloud your clarity.